All right, guys, so we have some major updates coming out of the Middle East as Israel is continuing not only with their genocidal campaign in Gaza, their ethnic cleansing in the West Bank, their bombing and potential invasion of Lebanon, as well as their bombing of Yemen, but now we also have layered on top of all of that, Benjamin Netanyahu dropping this statement here directly on Twitter, and his message says, "The people of Iran should know Israel stands with you." Now, as pointed out by Trita Parsi here of the Quincy Institute, pretty notable that Netanyahu is once again putting out these supposed messages to people in the region, but he's doing it in English with English subtitles. I think we could take a guess at who his actual intended audience is in this equation. He also points out that he has a habit of pretending to reach out to the people of countries he intends to bomb next. And I think that Trita is 100% correct. This is the exact same kind of statement that Netanyahu put out before his, again, genocidal campaign in Gaza. And it's also the same kind of message that he put out to the people of Lebanon before he began relentlessly bombing them as well. So now we have Netanyahu, I think, not so vaguely threatening the government of Iran here. Let's go ahead and listen to this clip.
I speak a lot about the leaders of Iran. Yet at this pivotal moment, I want to address you, the people of Iran. I want to do so directly, without filters, without middlemen. Every day, you see a regime that subjugates you make fiery speeches about defending Lebanon, defending Gaza. Yet every day, that regime plunges our region deeper into darkness and deeper into war. Every day, their puppets are eliminated. Ask Mohammed Def. Ask Nasrallah. There is nowhere in the Middle East Israel cannot reach. There is nowhere we will not go to protect our people and protect our country. With every passing moment, the regime is bringing you, the noble Persian people, closer to the abyss. The vast majority of Iranians know their regime doesn't care a whit about them. If it did care, if it cared about you, it would stop wasting billions of dollars on futile wars across the Middle East. It would start improving your lives. Imagine if all the vast money...
I'm sorry, but I got to interject because I think that kind of a statement is just kind of hilarious from an American's perspective, because you could say the same exact thing about our own government here in the US. Why are we sending Israel billions and billions of dollars on an annual basis when we could be spending that money on our own people here at home instead of spending it on imperialist projects across the world and especially in the Middle East? But okay, continue there.
The regime wasted on nuclear weapons and foreign wars, were invested in your children's education, and improving your healthcare, in building your nation's infrastructure, water, sewage, all the other things that you need. Imagine that. But you know one simple thing. Iran's tyrants don't care about your future, but you do. When Iran is finally free, and that moment will come a lot sooner than people think, everything will be different. Our two ancient peoples, the Jewish people and the Persian people, will finally be at peace. Our two countries, Israel and Iran, will be at peace. When that day comes, the terror network that the regime built in 5 continents will be bankrupt, dismantled.
Okay, so again, it's kind of hard to read into what he's saying there without coming away with the conclusion that that was a threat that Israel, or Israel aided by the United States, are going to imminently try to go to war with Iran and to topple the Iranian regime. I don't know how else you could possibly interpret Netanyahu saying that the day will come sooner than you think towards the Iranian people being free from the current regime. I don't know how else you could possibly interpret that kind of statement other than as a direct threat to the Iranian government. Now, listen, none of my commentary, none of my analysis here, is it required for you to be a fan of the Iranian government? Obviously, I would have many disagreements with the way, at least domestically, and in a foreign policy sense, how they run their country. You don't have to be a fan of the Iranian government. You don't have to be a fan of Hezbollah or the Houthis or Hamas or anything to understand the current dynamics of what is going on here. This is Benjamin Netanyahu explicitly threatening to potentially drag the United States, willingly so, into a massive regional war, with Iran being the main target. Now, ask yourselves as Americans, a vast majority of my audience happens to be Americans, but anybody around the world, do you want this to happen? Do you think that this would be a good outcome for the American people? Do you think this would be a good outcome for the people of Lebanon, the people of Palestine, the people of Iran, the people of Israel? No, of course it wouldn't. And yet, it's crazy to me that we are actually on the verge, like alarmingly close, to the United States getting into war with Iran on behalf of essentially Israel's right to keep genociding the people of Gaza. Which brings me to what I have next here, which is this article here, the headline from Haaretz, an Israeli outlet. And the headline is, even after taking out Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, which I covered in my most recent video, Netanyahu looks to intensify Israeli attacks on all fronts. So maybe that escalate to de-escalate strategy didn't really work, and it was actually just an escalation. But the byline here says, Netanyahu has completely lost interest in negotiations with Hamas while still paying lip service to bringing the hostages home. So we know that Benjamin Netanyahu hasn't given a single solitary shit about the Israeli hostages in Gaza. That's been clear for a very long time. This is why you see families of the hostages constantly out in the streets in Israel protesting against Benjamin Netanyahu because of his obstinance in getting towards a ceasefire deal with Hamas. He has been the primary blockade to a ceasefire deal for a very long time now. But this byline, in coordination with other reporting I've covered in the last couple of days, the last couple of weeks, the last couple of months, I think definitively shows that Benjamin Netanyahu is not willing to engage in good faith towards ceasefire talks when it comes to ending the genocide in Gaza. The most major reason for that, I think, is not only because of this ongoing ethnic cleansing of Palestinians that Israel has been engaging in for a long time, but in a more, localized sense, it's because Benjamin Netanyahu knows for a fact that his coalition that is keeping him in power right now will utterly collapse if he agrees to end the genocide in Gaza. So he won't do that. And I think that that's a really important point to focus on, because if it wasn't for the genocide in Gaza, then you would not have Hezbollah attacking Israel in the north. You would not have the Houthis attacking in the Red Sea. Right? These other things that are going on in the immediate surroundings of Israel, where they are continuing to escalate, these things could end immediately if Israel was willing to end their genocide in Gaza. Part of the reason I know this is because, as I covered in my video a couple of days ago on the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, where they leveled multiple apartment blocks, is that we had reporting from Benjamin Netanyahu, where they were openly saying the reason we killed Nasrallah is because he wouldn't agree to end hostilities between Israel and Lebanon, or between Hezbollah and the IDF, without there being some sort of agreement that he will ignore the genocide in Gaza, right? So in other words, Nasrallah's, sticking position in potential negotiations between the IDF and Hezbollah, his sticking position was, we'll end the hostilities, but you have to end the genocide in Gaza. Israel wasn't willing to do that, so they said, instead, we'll just kill you. That's what happened, right? So again, the core of this is that Israel is refusing to end the genocide in Gaza, and so therefore the hostilities with Hezbollah, the hostilities with the Houthis, the hostilities with Iran are going to continue and continue to escalate until this spirals to a point of no return. That is the trajectory that we find ourselves on right now, with the complete either abdication or, intentional approval of the Biden administration. Now, we also have at the same time, as I mentioned in the intro of this video, Israel is reportedly planning to invade Lebanon. Not just a relentless bombing campaign as they've been doing over the last few days, but to invade Lebanon. Here we have from the Washington Post, central Beirut hit for the first time since Israel escalated attacks on Lebanon. They continue down here saying that they've struck an apartment building in central Beirut early on Monday. It's the first attack that has happened in the capital city's limits since hostilities escalated. And they go on in this piece later on to say that reportedly Israeli officials have told the U.S. that they are potentially planning for an invasion of Lebanon. Here we have Joe Biden responding to this situation. So if you had any sort of hope for a potential off-ramp led by Joseph Robinette Biden himself, let's go ahead and dash those hopes here real quick.
Israel may be now launching a limited operation into Lebanon. Are you aware of that? Are you comfortable with their plans?
I'm more aware than you might know, and I'm comfortable with them stopping. We should have a ceasefire now. Thank you.
Right. So he says he's comfortable with them stopping. Right? Who's them? Is it Hezbollah? Is it Israel? Is it both of them? And he says he's in favor of an immediate ceasefire. Now, sure, at surface level, you could look at that and say, oh, he's in favor of a ceasefire. What more would you want from him? Well, what you would want from him is for him to use the leverage that he has as not only the most powerful man on the face of the planet, but also as the close ally of Israel, the main weapons supplier to Israel, the country that has been giving them arms and funding and diplomatic cover for the last 11 months of the genocide in Gaza. You would expect him to use some of the leverage that he has as that man in order to stop Israel, in order to force them into a position where they have to agree to a ceasefire. Now, Biden can come out every couple of days, and I see the articles, I've shown you guys probably 500 of them at this point, of reports that, oh, well, Biden is angry behind the scenes. He's really upset with Benjamin Netanyahu. He's frustrated with him, right? He's livid behind the scenes. And then the next day, after they say how Biden feels humiliated and he's pissed off, the next day you get reports that Biden is sending another $8 billion to Israel. Tell me how that makes sense. Step number one, if you wanted a ceasefire, is to cease the firing, cease giving the weapons to Israel, which they are using to continue the firing. That's step number one. And by the way, that doesn't even require going like out of your way to leverage political capital as the president. You're not giving up much. Number one, you're a lame duck president, right? So you can basically do whatever you want on the way out. If you want to stand on your own principles, now's the time to do it. You're not even running for re-election right now. But number two, it's the popular thing to do, right? For us to cut off weapon shipments to Israel. A majority of the American people support that measure. The American people don't want us to keep sending weapons to Israel to drop on the heads of Palestinian children in Gaza. That's not what the American people want. The polling data has been very definitive on this for a very long time. So that's number two. Number three is that all you would have to do to cut off the weapons to Israel is to follow U.S. law, right? We just covered a few days ago the reports from ProPublica of how Antony Blinken got several reports from his own agencies that Israel was blocking U.S. humanitarian aid from getting into Gaza. We also got reports from Benjamin Netanyahu, behind-the-scenes conversations between him and Blinken, that the reason they were blocking the aid is because there are members of Netanyahu's coalition, guys like Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, who explicitly were saying they don't want even an aspirin to get into Gaza. Why? Because they wanted to collectively punish the civilian population of Gaza after October 7th. So we have confirmation from Antony Blinken's own agencies, right, saying Israel is illegally blocking the aid. We have confirmation from Benjamin Netanyahu that the reason they're blocking the aid is because they want to collectively punish the Palestinian civilian population. And then Blinken took all of that and he went to Congress and fucking lied about it. Because it is illegal under U.S. law for us to send weapons to a country that is blocking our humanitarian aid. So the weapon shipments that we are sending to Israel are completely illegal, not only under international law, but under U.S. domestic law. So the reason I go through all of that is just to say, again, this is very simple. If you're Joe Biden, all you would have to do in order to check Israel to prevent this from spiraling further is to follow U.S. law. But instead, Joe Biden, repeatedly for 11 months straight now, is violating U.S. law in order to allow Israel to continue the genocide and to continue to escalate with everybody around them. Now, part of that escalation is here we have the Israeli army launching air raids on Yemen's Ras Isa and Hodeidah. Now, if you guys remember a while back when I was focusing very heavily on the Saudis, the Saudi-led or the U.S.-backed genocidal campaign on the people of Yemen, the Hodeidah port is incredibly important for humanitarian aid getting into the people of Yemen, right? More on that here in a second from Ryan Grimm. But here we have Israel. Now, the Houthis responded. They sent, apparently some missiles toward Tel Aviv, but Israel then responded to that, and they have struck the Hodeidah port. They have struck numerous places around Yemen in response to this, as in, this continuation in this back and forth with the Houthis. Now, show you some video of this here, of what this actually looked like on the ground. You can see some of the aftermath of what looks to be a strike here inside of Yemen. And again, as Ryan Grimm points out here, Hodeidah is the key port for humanitarian entry into Yemen. Keeping it open has been a top priority of those who oppose famine for years now. Israel just blasted it. Israel is also blockading Lebanon and sieging Gaza and the West Bank. So again, keep in mind, I showed you a video, I think it was a couple weeks ago at this point, of one of the Pentagon spokespeople being asked once again whether or not this war has spread beyond Gaza. And they're still insisting at this point that it's contained within Gaza. They're insisting that this hasn't become a regional war already. Guys, Israel and the United States together have bombed what? Inside of Lebanon, inside of Gaza, inside of the West Bank, inside of Yemen, inside of Iraq, inside of Syria, and inside of Iran. All within the last 11 months. And we are to believe that this is not spiraling out of control. that this is contained within Gaza. Really? Does this look like it's contained within Gaza? No. And again, I think it's pretty noteworthy that they struck Hodeidah, given the importance of that in the delivery of humanitarian aid to the people of Yemen. Now, we also have a response here from the head of the armed forces in Yemen, of Ansar Allah. And, basically they say here, I'll just summarize it. They say, this is not the end of it. We are going to continue to escalate. We're going to continue to, try to launch strikes against Israel in protest of their genocide in Gaza. That's the core of it, again, which I think is, pretty self-explanatory at this point. Now, we also have this statement here from Joe Biden, which I don't think should really calm anybody's concerns at a moment like this. Really just alarming that this man in his current state is the most powerful man on earth, that he is the president, given this kind of stuff. Here we have a video of him being asked about these strikes in Yemen. Let's go ahead and listen to how Biden handles this.
Mr. President, will you deploy more U.S. troops to the Middle East?
Mr. President, has Netanyahu gone too far?
Any comment on the strikes in Yemen, Mr. President?
Both sides have got to settle the strike. Support the collective bargaining effort. I think they'll settle the strike.
Okay, so what happened here is, I don't know if it's a combination of it's loud outside and he's struggling to hear, or if it's just his old age or whatever the case may be, his possible dementia or Parkinson's or whatever this guy has. But he was asked a question, any comment on these strikes in Yemen, meaning the Israeli strikes on the port of Hodeidah in Yemen. And Biden's response to that was, I've spoken to both sides. So apparently he's in contact with the Houthis. He says, they got to settle the strike. I'm supporting the collective bargaining effort. I think they'll settle the strike. So here's what happened. He misheard, or he misunderstood, and thought that the question was about this port strike that's happening, where workers across ports on the eastern seaboard and in the Gulf Coast around the United States are striking for better wages, better working conditions, etc. And so he said, I support the collective bargaining effort, which on the one hand is like, again, kind of alarming that you're being asked about this escalation to a regional war in the Middle East and you're confused about it or you can't hear it or something like that. But it's also a little bit promising, almost in like a dark and twisted way, that his immediate instinct was to say, I support the collective bargaining effort. So standing with unions, standing with the union guys here, but in the complete wrong situation. Okay, now we move on. A couple more things here. We also had Ayman al-Safdi, who is the foreign minister of Jordan, and he came out and basically blasted Israel for sort of the broader handling of this entire situation. And, I think made an important point here, which is that Israel is constantly talking about how they want to normalize relations with surrounding Arab nations. And here he outlines that the core blockade to that happening is not anything to do with the surrounding nations. It has to do with Israel's illegal occupation and their continued violence towards their neighbors, right? So let's go ahead and listen to a little bit of this clip here.
I want to add one sentence. The Israeli Prime Minister came here today and said that Israel is surrounded by those who want to destroy it, an enemy. We're here, members of a Muslim Arab committee mandated by 57 Arab and Muslim countries. And I can tell you here, very unequivocally, all of us are willing to, right now, guarantee the security of Israel in the context of Israel ending the occupation and allowing for the emergence of a Palestinian state, independent state, along the references will agree. He is creating that danger because he simply does not want the two-state solution. And if he does not want the two-state solution, can you ask Israeli officials, what is their end game? Other than just wars and wars and wars. I'm telling you, all of us in the Arab world here, we want a peace in which Israel lives in peace and security, accepted, normalized with all Arab countries in the context of ending the occupation, withdrawing from Arab territory, allowing for the emergence of an independent, sovereign Palestinian state on June 4, 1967, lines with occupied Jerusalem as capital. That is our narrative. And we will guarantee Israel's security in that context. Can you ask Israelis what's their narrative other than I'm going to continue to go to war, I'm going to kill this and kill that and destroy this and this that? The amount of damage that the Israeli government has done, 30 years of efforts to convince people that peace is possible, this Israeli government killed it. The amount of dehumanization, hatred, bitterness will take generations to navigate through. So ultimately the question is, we want peace, and we've laid out a plan for peace. Ask any Israeli official, what is their plan for peace? You'll get nothing, because they're only thinking of the first step, we're going to go destroy Gaza, inflame the West Bank, destroy Lebanon, and after that, they have no plan. We have a plan. We have no partner for peace in Israel. There is a partner for peace in the Arab world.
I mean, hard to disagree with a single thing that he just said there, right? He's calling for a two-state solution along the 1967 borders with Jerusalem as the capital. That is, by the way, what international law also calls for, right? That's what the vast majority of the world thinks should happen. A vast majority of the world that has already gone, beyond the United States and Israel on the world stage and recognized a Palestinian state. So the demands there are pretty fucking reasonable, right? It's hard to get around that. And as he points out there, the unfortunate reality is that if you go to an Israeli official like Itamar Ben-Gvir, Bezalel Smotrich, or Yoav Gallant, or Benjamin Netanyahu, what exactly is the plan right now? Because as it stands, you're escalating with all of your neighbors. You're continuing to isolate yourself on the world stage into the status of a pariah state at this point. What is the plan for long-term peace? Just to eradicate everybody around you? Is that the plan that you're going with here? I mean, as he said, there are plenty of people who are perfectly willing to recognize Israel, to, work on security agreements with them if and when they follow international law and stop illegally occupying the Palestinian people and to stop their illegal settlement expansion into Palestinian territories. That's the demand. Now, it's a demand that obviously Benjamin Netanyahu and much of Israel doesn't want to accept. That's the unfortunate reality of it. It's not even remotely on the table for them right now. As a matter of discussion, it's not. So I guess, it's hard to know what to say at this point, other than to agree with what he just said. There's no plan in place here, guys. Biden can come out and say that he's in favor of a two-state solution, all that he wants. They've been saying it for the last however many decades, but he can come out and say that, all that he wants. But if the on-the-ground realities say differently, right? If Israel continues to illegally occupy the West Bank, they continue to fragment the Palestinian population there into a million different enclaves that could never feasibly form a contiguous Palestinian state, well, then there is no two-state solution. There is no two-state plan that's even hypothetically or logistically possible at this point. Israel has utterly destroyed that possibility. So one last thing that I wanted to point out here, again, is that politically, this is not even an intelligent move. It's not. Morally, it's obviously abhorrent, but politically, it's also just as abhorrent. Because this is an issue that could potentially cost a candidate like Kamala Harris some pretty important swing states. Here we have a scoop from Steph Kite saying that Alyssa Slotkin, a Michigan representative, warned donors last week that internal polling for her Senate campaign shows Vice President Kamala Harris is underwater in Michigan. She says, "I'm not feeling my best about where we are in Kamala Harris in this state." I wonder how that could have happened, right? It's not as if Michigan has some sort of an Arab population in it, or a Palestinian American population, or a Lebanese American population in it. No, it couldn't possibly be that. It must be something else, right? Trump is just super popular in Michigan, I guess. No, guys, listen. This is one of those issues where, sure, if you do general polling across the entirety of the United States, Gaza is not the number one issue. It's just not, unfortunately. There are other issues on the economy and immigration and abortion and whatever else the case may be, and that makes sort of sense. But the idea that this is not a key issue that could potentially sink Kamala Harris's chances, the idea that she did not use this amazing opportunity that she was given, right? When Biden dropped out and Kamala Harris took up the mantle, people didn't necessarily connect her with everything that Biden did. She had an opportunity there to say, no, I'm going to be different. Here's how I'm going to be different, especially on this kind of key issue, right? She could have done that. She chose not to do that. And so you make your bed, and I guess you're going to sleep in it. So the unfortunate reality is that we have two candidates, Trump, who would be arguably worse than Biden or Kamala on this issue, right? I don't think for any sort of secret issues or secret reasons. I've covered this extensively on my channel. I think Trump would, somehow miraculously be worse than Joe Biden or Kamala, but they're both terrible. Both sides of the coin, when it comes to the issue of war and peace, when it comes to the issue of Israel, are just absolutely awful. And so we're faced with a situation now where it just doesn't look like there's any good outcome. I wish that I could tell you guys we're on the verge of peace, we're on the verge of a ceasefire, we're on the verge of Biden changing policy and he's going to confront Israel, or Kamala is going to place her flag in the ground and stand up. I wish I could tell you guys that, but it's just not happening, unfortunately. And so we're just continuously in this doom loop towards setting the entire region on fire because the U.S. is unwilling to check our closest ally in the region.
Politic guy has the best politics. Believe me,
No one does it like him. Believe me. Everyone is saying